6 of my classmates were shot and 2 were murdered. We were in a regular Holocaust history class, and then we heard the shots. Oh my God! Oh my God! And I had to hide underneath one of my murdered classmates to survive. We just called our parents, and then I said my last goodbyes, and I told them how much I loved them.
On Valentine's Day 2018, Nicholas Cruz, a disturbed young man, shot dead 17 people at a school in Parkland, Florida. It was the worst high school shooting in US history, and the 18th school shooting of the year. The debate over gun rights and restrictions was sparked once again. And Parkland would prove to be a seminal moment in Donald Trump's presidency. Teenagers affected by the tragedy spawned huge nationwide protests for gun reform.
If all our government and president can do is send thoughts and prayers, then it's time for victims to be the change that we need to see.
The choice for Mr. Trump was clear. Would he sympathise with victims, backing tighter gun laws?
We're determined to turn our grief into action. I really believe that.
Or would he stand foursquare with his political base?
To the NRA, I can proudly say, I will never, ever let you down.
Mass shootings are an everyday occurrence in the United States, with one major shooting happening every 2 months. There are an estimated 393 million civilian-owned firearms, significantly more than there are people. The US has 120.5 guns per 100 residents. A poll after Parkland showed a surge in support for gun control, with 65% of Americans favouring some tightening of the law. Despite the national outcry, there was also a renewed commitment to the Second Amendment, which protects the right of people to keep and bear arms, something many Republicans and some Democrats firmly defend. But many of this year's Democratic candidates are campaigning on tighter gun control.
You know, I look at the gun violence crisis and how it's torn apart so many families. Enough is enough.
But groups including the National Rifle Association oppose tighter laws.
To stop a bad guy with a gun, it takes a good guy with a gun.
Mr. Trump invited victims of gun crime to the White House.
I was reading today that a person 20 years old walked into a store and bought an AR-15 in 5 minutes with an expired ID. How is it that easy to buy this type of weapon? How do we not stop this after Columbine, after Sandy Hook? I'm sitting with a mother that lost her son. It's still happening.
Nicole Hockley lost her 6-year-old son Dylan in the Sandy Hook school shooting in 2012.
School shootings are like an arrow through the heart for me because they take me right back to what it was like hearing about there's a shooter at our school, looking for my child, finding one and not finding the other. Everyone comes together after a tragedy, but then you forget. Time gets in the way. That's human nature, and that's sad. I think for a lot of people this is a single issue vote, but I think the issue of gun violence and how to prevent it is becoming more and more front of mind for a lot of voters. That is a shift change for the country.
Democrats in Congress made gun control a rallying cry. In the beginning, Mr. Trump appeared to waver in his support for America's National Rifle Association, the mainstay of the gun lobby.
Half of you are so afraid of the NRA. There's nothing to be afraid of. And you know what? If they're not with you, we have to fight them every once in a while. That's okay.
He flirted with acceding to some Democrat demands. The president talked about raising the minimum age for buying semi-automatic assault weapons from 18 to 21. He also voiced support for banning bump stocks, a device used to turn semi-automatics into full machine guns.
So you won't have to worry about bump stock. Shortly, that'll be gone.
Extreme risk protection orders, which would preemptively take guns away from dangerous people. And he explored the idea of tighter background checks on gun buyers.
We've got to do background checks. If we see a sicko, I don't want him having a gun.
But before long, Mr. Trump was doubling down on gun rights and calling for teachers to be armed.
Your Second Amendment rights are under siege, but they will never, ever be under siege as long as I'm your president.
I think the idea of arming teachers and providing funding to arm teachers is ludicrous. They do not need, nor should they have, the additional responsibility of having a firearm in order to potentially shoot one of their own students.
I would like to tell Donald Trump that all of our lives are just as important as any American's freedom to own a gun.
The NRA, which supports arming teachers, donated $55 million to Mr. Trump and other Republican candidates in 2016, and that money is still pouring in. And even among many Democrats, support for the Second Amendment remains strong.
My name is Ed Gardner. I'm the executive director of the Liberal Gun Club. As soon as I turned 18, I bought my first firearm. And growing up in the Midwest of the United States, that was something kids did. There are some Democrats who have indeed declared sort of an intent to ban firearms. That's a political non-starter in this country. You have to get around a number of issues, not the least of which is the Constitution itself. The problem probably isn't the simple existence of the tool.
I myself, I have a gun because I want to be able to protect myself and my family. There's either the right, backed by the NRA, or there's sort of the holdbacks, you know, saying we can't have any more guns, we got to ban guns, and there needs to be some other voice that sort of tempers that conversation and tries to look how we move forward.
For Mr. Trump, the issue of gun control has indeed become complex. Survivors of Parkland forced it to the top of the political agenda. And they have brought new energy to the campaign, inspiring more young people to vote and to vote for change. They could help secure Congress for the Democrats in the midterm elections. Mr. Trump has made a clear choice to side with his political base. There will be no diluting of gun rights on his watch. Mr. Trump knows that 57% of Republicans have a gun in their house, and many Republican candidates, as well as Democrat candidates, will side with him in the midterm elections. His aggressive backing of the Second Amendment is what many of his supporters love most about him. He is responding and will continue to respond accordingly.
By the way, if you only had a choice of one, what would you rather have, the Second Amendment or the tax cuts? Go ahead. Second Amendment.